I want you to close your eyes for a second and just imagine you're stepping into this really elite, highly respected New York art gallery.
Right, the kind of place where you feel like you have to whisper.
Exactly. It's the mid-1960s, so it's as quiet as a cathedral in there. And the walls are lined with these very serious, heavily framed black and white photographs.
You know, sweeping landscapes, profound human struggles, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's an atmosphere that completely demands hushed reverence. But then you turn a corner and you are hit right in the face by this blinding, aggressive photograph.
It's a total shock to the system.
It really is. It's a picture of a blood-red ceiling. There's a bare, cheap light bulb right in the middle, and these messy white electrical cables branching out like a chaotic spiderweb. The invisible, stuffy authority of that gallery just shatters.
You can easily imagine the gallery patrons just stopping dead in their tracks, whispering, wondering if someone accidentally hung up a botched, cheap print from a local diner or something.
Right. And that reaction is exactly what we're getting into today. For this deep dive, we're pulling from vicious exhibition reviews from the 1970s, some really rare interviews with the artist himself, and technical breakdowns of vintage photochemistry.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is. Our mission here is to explore the subversive genius of William Eggleston. This is the man who took color photography, which, at the time was considered cheap, commercial, completely unserious, and used it to stage an absolute revolution in the fine art world.
He basically systematically dismantled the established hierarchy of what the world considered worthy of being photographed.
And anyone listening to this who follows photography knows the mid-century titans had already cemented the rules. Like, black and white was the language of serious art.
Yeah, it provided that necessary distance.
Yeah.
That dignity.
Exactly. So into this incredibly rigid world steps Eggleston. He's born in 1939 in Memphis, Tennessee, grows up in the heady, humid atmosphere of the Mississippi Delta.
And he comes from a very wealthy, aristocratic Southern family.
Right. He attends Vanderbilt and the University of Mississippi, though he doesn't really care much for traditional academia. Yeah. And crucially, because of his family's wealth, he never really has to worry about making a living.
Which is huge. I mean, his background is the engine for his entire perspective. He starts shooting in the late 1950s, initially following those established rules of black and white, but his environment inevitably pulls him in a different direction.
But here's the thing I've always wondered. With endless trust fund resources and, zero pressure to clock into a 9-to-5 job, why didn't he just travel the world?
That's a great question.
Like, why not photograph global tragedies? Or exotic landscapes, or the massive political shifts of the 1960s, like so many of his contemporaries were doing.
Well, the paradox of William Eggleston is that his immense privilege, combined with the innate slowness of his Southern aristocratic life, is exactly what shaped his lens.
Oh, so?
He didn't have to hustle across the globe to find a grand narrative. He had the ultimate luxury, which is time. That allowed him to focus obsessively on the melancholic surface textures of his own backyard.
Just staring at the ordinary stuff.
Exactly. He could sit on a porch for hours just studying the way the afternoon light hit a rusted sign or a diner table. He was finding an entirely different kind of intensity in the mundane.
So he's intensely studying these deeply banal aspects of Southern life, which means he needs a medium that doesn't hide that everyday reality behind an elegant black and white filter.
Right, he needs something that forces the viewer to confront the banality head on.
And by the mid-1960s, he pivots to color film. But he doesn't just drop off standard rolls at the local pharmacy, right? Yeah. He discovers dye transfer printing.
Oh, yeah.
Explain how this process actually works mechanically, because this isn't just dipping photo paper in Standard Developer.
Not even close. Dye transfer printing was this incredibly laborious, highly expensive chemical technique. It was used almost exclusively for high-end commercial advertising.
Like glossy cigarette ads or luxury car catalogs.
Exactly. Mechanically, it requires separating a color image into 3 distinct negatives. One for cyan, one for magenta, and one for yellow.
Okay.
And these aren't just projected onto paper. The printer creates physical gelatin matrices for each color. These matrices actually absorb the liquid dyes, much like a sponge.
Wow.
Then they are physically pressed, layer by painstaking layer, in perfect registration directly onto the paper.
So it's closer to traditional printmaking or maybe building a stained glass window. The colors aren't just sitting on the surface, they're like trapped in the gelatin.
Yeah, the dyes have a physical, almost sculptural presence. It creates this impossibly saturated, hyper-real image. What's fascinating here is how the dye transfer process allowed Eggleston to essentially weaponize color.
Weaponize it.
Yeah. In a standard photograph, a red car is just a vehicle that happens to be red. But when you push that image through the dye transfer process, the color red becomes a heavy, aggressive main character in the image.
So the saturation demands your attention before your brain even processes what the object actually is.
Exactly.
So he's spending thousands of dollars in immense physical labor to print pictures of cheap suburban driveways.
Right.
It would be like commissioning a master sculptor in Renaissance Italy to carve a hyper-realistic marble statue of a crushed soda can.
That's a great way to put it.
And then he takes these insanely expensive glowing prints to the absolute fortress of high art, the Museum of Modern Art in New York City.
The year is 1976. The exhibition is called William Eggleston's Guide, and it's organized by MoMA's incredibly influential photography curator, John Sarkowski.
And the backlash from the art establishment was basically apocalyptic.
Oh, they hated it.
The New York Times essentially labeled it the most hated exhibition of the year. I mean, critics walked in expecting profound portraits of humanity and instead found blindingly colorful photos of parked cars, empty ovens, and trash cans.
They were completely baffled.
But wait, I have a theory I want to pitch to you. Sarkowski was a visionary curator, right? He had his finger on the pulse of the art world.
Definitely.
So he had to know the establishment would completely reject this. Was he using Eggleston to set a trap for the critics?
Oh, he absolutely set a trap. Sarkowski was deeply frustrated with the suffocating elitism of the 1970s art world.
So he wanted to shake things up.
Yes. There was this unspoken, rigid law that dictated art had to possess a grand political message or some tragic narrative to be considered valid. Sarkowski used Eggleston's intensely saturated narrative-free images to test the critics.
To see what they do when there was no obvious story.
Exactly. He was challenging them to see if they were open-minded enough to find profound beauty and complex composition in the yellow paint of a street curb, rather than relying on epic, world-changing events to just hand them the beauty on a silver platter.
But why were the critics so threatened by a photo of a street curb? If they didn't like it, couldn't they just dismiss it? The level of anger suggests something much deeper was at stake.
It was a direct threat to their gatekeeping power.
Wow.
Think about it. If a photograph of a mundane oven or a rusted tricycle is elevated to the level of high art, then the critics lose their authority. They had spent decades learning how to decode important subjects.
So Eggleston stripped away the clear hero, the dramatic event, and the obvious narrative.
Right. Without a story to cling to, the critics felt intellectually naked. They were forced to just look at the raw, saturated reality of the American South, and it terrified them because they didn't know how to evaluate it.
To truly understand what caused this monumental meltdown in the art world, I think we need to look at the specific images that broke the rules. Let's take you, the listener, through that gallery right now.
Okay, do it.
Let's start with how he elevated geometry and the mundane. Picture a photograph titled The Tricycle, shot in Memphis in 1970.
The subject is just a rusted children's tricycle sitting on a cracked, sun-baked suburban street. And in the background, there are a couple of classic, oversized American cars parked in front of typical suburban houses.
But he doesn't shoot this from a normal standing height. He places the camera practically on the asphalt, shooting from the ground up.
Which is a very specific choice.
Right, because visually, that specific angle is traditionally reserved for glorifying powerful subjects. You use that low, monumental angle to photograph towering skyscrapers or marble statues of war heroes or presidents standing at a podium.
Exactly. And by applying that heroic, monumental perspective to a piece of forgotten plastic and rust on a driveway, Eggleston fundamentally disrupts our visual hierarchy.
He's making the ordinary look massive.
He is forcing the viewer to look at suburban detritus with the exact same reverence they would give to a monument.
He does something really similar with a piece simply titled Memphis from 1972. You see a woman wearing a navy blue floral dress. She's sitting alone on a brightly painted yellow concrete curb on the side of a road.
At first glance, it feels like a mistake.
Yeah, like a snapshot you'd take by accident while waiting for a bus.
But the composition is staggeringly precise. The mathematical geometry of that bright yellow line slices diagonally through the frame with flawless precision.
It just jumps right out at you.
And it contrasts perfectly against the deep navy of her dress and the green foliage in the background. The yellow curb operates as the spine of the entire photograph. If you remove it, the whole image structurally collapses.
So he proves that mathematical perfection and profound aesthetic order are just hiding in plain sight on random street corners.
Exactly.
He's not just documenting the South, he's reorganizing how we perceive its basic elements. Which brings us to another tactic he mastered, psychological tension. Let's revisit the image that opened our deep dive. The red ceiling, shot in Greenwood, Mississippi in 1973.
Standing in front of this print, the sheer physical force of that dye transfer red dominates your visual field.
It's so intense.
It's a claustrophobic corner of a room, an aggressive blood-red ceiling, a bare light bulb in the center, white electrical cables stapled to the plaster like a chaotic spider web.
It carries this immense, suffocating weight. You look at it, and you can almost feel the humid, heavy, tense atmosphere of a southern summer night.
You really can.
He takes an interior space that you would normally never give a second glance and turns it into a scene of immense psychological dread. The color is so dominant, it feels like it's compressing the oxygen in the room.
The color becomes the narrative. We see this even more clearly in Morton, Mississippi, taken around 1969.
Right, the guy with the gun.
Yeah. The viewer is looking into a pale, institutional blue room. Sitting on the edge of a bed is an old man wearing a brilliantly intense, warm red shirt, and resting casually on his knee is a black gun.
But there is zero melodrama in this image. No action is happening. We don't know who this man is, why he has the gun, or what he is thinking.
He isn't threatening anyone.
No. But the colors do all the psychological heavy lifting. The contrast between the vibrating, visually hot red of his shirt and the cold, distant blue of the room creates an unbearable suspense.
The color creates the tension, even when we are completely deprived of the factual context.
So looking at these images, a rusted tricycle, treated like a monument, a yellow curb acting as structural perfection, a red ceiling suffocating the viewer, it reveals the radical philosophy tying Eggleston's entire life's work together.
Right, it's the concept of the democratic camera, which was also the title of his massive, sprawling project, The Democratic Forest.
Explain the mechanics of this philosophy, because it really is the core of his legacy.
In Eggleston's eyes, there is absolutely no visual hierarchy in the world. A crushed, muddy Coke can lying in the gutter, a mundane park bench, and the majestic, sweeping vistas of the Grand Canyon, they all possess the exact same optical value.
The exact same value.
Yes, the camera lens doesn't judge. It treats every single photon of light entering the aperture equally. Therefore, the photographer should treat every subject with equal dignity.
Okay, I have to challenge this on behalf of anyone listening who is thinking practically about art right now.
Go for it.
If a muddy piece of trash in the gutter is treated with the exact same reverence as the Grand Canyon, doesn't that inherently mean nothing is actually special?
I see where you're going with this.
Like, if there is no hierarchy, isn't it just visual nihilism? Doesn't this completely empty the meaning of art if literally everything qualifies?
See, if we connect this to the bigger picture, that is the exact philosophical wall the critics crashed into in 1976.
Because it feels as a cop-out.
But Eggleston isn't lowering the Grand Canyon to the level of street trash. That's the trap people fall into. What he is doing is demanding that you elevate your quality of attention.
Oh, I like that.
He is arguing that art is not an object out in the world waiting to be discovered. Art is the intensity and the clarity with which you choose to look at the world.
So it's a shift from the object itself to the observer.
Exactly. Take his famous photo, Untitled Peaches, from 1973. It is literally just a glass jar of canned peaches sitting on a mundane kitchen counter.
Sounds incredibly boring.
Right. But the way he captures the luminous orange of the fruit, the complex reflections on the glass, the specific quality of the light hitting the counter, he elevates that jar to the level of a classical Dutch still life painting. He forces you to look at the peaches with the same awe you would reserve for a mountain range. He democratizes the world by proving that aesthetic beauty is everywhere, constantly, if you cultivate the discipline to look for it.
And that profound shift in perspective, moving the value from the object being photographed to the mind of the person looking at it, brings Eggleston's legacy straight out of the 1970s gallery and right into our modern lives.
It really does.
He single-handedly validated color photography in the fine art world, and made everyday life a celebrated subject. Today, whenever you pull out your smartphone because you notice a beautiful shadow falling across your coffee cup,
Hmm.
or the way a neon sign reflects in a puddle on the sidewalk, you are carrying William Eggleston's DNA.
You're exercising that democratic camera.
Exactly. You are asserting that an ordinary moment possesses intrinsic visual value. His influence really is the foundation of contemporary visual culture.
It's everywhere. We just don't always realize where it came from.
But this leaves us with a fascinating, maybe slightly unsettling question to mull over. Eggleston championed the democratic camera, the idea of looking at the mundane world as it is, without a hierarchy. But today, we all have a camera in our pockets, and we are constantly photographing our daily lives.
Constantly.
Think about the era of Instagram, highly curated photo grids, and now AI-generated imagery. We have access to the ultimate democratic tools, but we use them to artificially saturate, filter, and heavily curate our reality.
Yeah, we meticulously edit out the messy white cables and the rusted tricycles to present a flawless version of our lives.
Right, so did we actually fulfill Eggleston's vision of finding profound beauty everywhere, or did we just use his tools to invent a new, even more rigid hierarchy of what looks good on a screen?
That is a great question.
The next time you find yourself framing a photo of your lunch or your living room, ask yourself, are you truly looking at the world democratically? Or are you just building a new digital version of that stuffy 1960s art gallery, terrified of letting the unedited blood-red reality of life break through the frame?